Kia ora. Welcome to Off Script. Today's topic is Marriage Story. Let's talk about it.
What was your first experience watching the film?
My first experience watching Marriage Story was very apprehensive.
Did I force you to watch it around the time it came out?
You absolutely did. You watched it because of Scarlett.
I was in my Scarlett Johansson phase, that's for sure.
Absolutely. I thought it would be funny because of Adam Driver. All I'd really known about Adam Driver at the time is, he's the guy people make fun of, because people were making fun of Kylo Ren.
I'm kind of glad that I hadn't watched those Star Wars movies before going into it, because if I had, I probably would have only been able to see him as Kylo Ren, whereas since I'd only seen him in one of those movies and he was like not hardly in it, but his face wasn't shown until towards the end, I didn't have this idea of what he was like, so the vulnerable scenes worked better for me, in my opinion.
Well, it seemed like some people went into this movie of, Black Widow and Kylo Ren are married.
I know Scarlett also got asked during an interview who would win, Black Widow or Kylo Ren, and the interviewer called Kylo Ren a dropout, which I found very amusing.
I think that's very, very
It's pretty accurate.
yeah. So Marriage Story to me at first was something I wasn't very interested in. I didn't really want to watch a movie about divorce. It was actually a real roller coaster for me. I didn't actually expect it to make me feel things. But I think the fact that Scarlett and Adam were able to convey the emotions of these characters so effectively is a credit to their abilities as actors.
Scarlett would have been able to pull from experience because she's gone through a divorce, and she discussed that with the writer and director who had also gone through a divorce. But Adam hadn't. He's married, hopefully won't get divorced. So Scarlett had something to pull from in her actual life. She knew what it's like to feel those things, whereas Adam was more coming directly from a place of taking on a character and acting it.
So I remember back in high school, our drama teacher spoke about pulling emotions to portray on stage from memory and past emotion, and how that was a viable method to act. But in some ways it was also therapeutic, but also at the same time it was a risk, because
you have to be careful because you're opening yourself up emotionally. You're putting yourself in a vulnerable place, and then people are going to critique the way you act, and you could take it more as a personal attack.
It's a powerful yet risky acting method.
My first experience watching the film, I saw it recommended to me on Netflix 2 days after it had come out. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew was it was called Marriage Story. The preview that I got for it was just one of the opening scenes. I think it was the What I Love About Charlie part. And
so just the beginning of the movie?
Yeah, just the beginning of the movie. So I was like, oh, cute. They seem happy. And it had Scarlett in it, so I thought, yeah, I'll watch it. And then after it cuts from their little what I love about each other bits, found out that it was actually about divorce. I don't really know what I expected, though, because they wouldn't have made a movie just like a slice of life of this happy married couple.
Well, of course, most movies feel so they need to have a conflict. However, I know in many anime shows, their conflicts don't necessarily come from, oh no, the relationship is going to break down. They're able to create a nice slice of life viewing experience without tearing down our main characters.
There are quite a few differences between a Hollywood movie and an anime, though.
There are. But yeah, I didn't expect it to go straight into the divorce so quickly. It was such a juxtaposition for them both to begin talking about what they love about each other, straight to, we're in divorce counselling. But
was it even counselling? I think it was like separation mediation.
Yeah.
Like Nicole had straight up decided they were going to get divorced, whereas I don't think Charlie believed it. Some characters mention do you think they're actually separating this time? So that indicates that they've had moments of breaking up but getting back together. So Charlie probably thought it was just another one of those incidents.
Well, of course, it seems like they'd been in this relationship for
It was
around
10
a decade.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, a decade. And of course, during a decade, many things happen.
And she would have been young, because she mentioned being 19 or 20 when she saw him for the first time. And she saw him on a show, and then she said she never left.
Yeah.
So she left being engaged to one guy and feeling dead inside and unhappy to someone that made her feel alive again.
Yeah.
And she was getting this validation of being an actress that was bringing people to the theatre, but that slowly died down and she started to get that dead feeling again.
Yeah, which I think is something that came from the fact that she came across to me as one of those people that may never be truly happy being settled down. She needs to continue moving.
I don't think it's necessarily that she can't be happy settled down. I think it's more that she wasn't feeling fulfilled within herself with the relationship. Charlie just saw her as an extension of himself. Like, she was his muse. It was all about what he wanted to do. She wasn't able to do the things like directing. She wanted to direct. She wasn't getting to be a person outside of acting for Charlie and being Henry's mother. If she had an opportunity to discover who she was, so she would have been about like 21 or 22 when she got pregnant with Henry.
Yeah.
That's really young to have a kid. Like, if I had a kid next year, I don't know who I am. So having a kid that young, she's forced into the mother role, and now she's got someone else that she has to look after. She can't discover who she is.
But we could also see the idea of a lover's blind portrayed but with Nicole, because we're seeing two distinctly different styles of being in love with these two characters. With Charlie, I feel it's more of a falling in love with what you see of yourself in another person, where a lot of his love for Nicole came from a place of, I don't think it was inherently ego in the beginning. I think it was part of his trauma response.
In the beginning, they got wrapped up. They would have gotten wrapped up in it. They were young. He was an up-and-coming director. Well, he wasn't at the time when they met. He was kind of a no-one. Whereas she had been in a movie and she had career prospects ahead of her. There was also a chance that he fell in love with the idea of what she could do for him. Because she brought attention to the theatre. He wouldn't have... I mean, he might have had a career without her, but he does really abstract things. And that's quite a niche audience.
Unfortunately, as even in our small city, abstract theatre, it just, no matter how amazing it was, people just didn't support it.
Yeah. I think part of that is also because we're in the South.
Unfortunately.
People that enjoy that kind of stuff would probably be in Wellington.
I think it was part of where he could go with Nicole. What new world could she bring him? Because he wanted to leave his trauma-filled background behind.
Yeah, he wanted to be someone completely separate of who his parents were.
Yeah. And then with Nicole, it felt to me almost like she had a planned life. Like, you were going to become a movie star, you were going to be engaged, and in many ways maybe she felt suffocated. And with Charlie, she saw an escape to do something different.
It almost perhaps could have been her rebellious phase in a sense.
Possibly.
Like, she had all this potential to be in movies on Hollywood, but then she left that to join a small theatre company that does abstract things where you have to work a lot harder to get any kind of influence as that kind of director. Though I suppose we're comparing this to what it would be like in New Zealand, whereas New York, there's a huge population and there will be more of those niche communities.
I also feel as though potentially Nicole's mother played it in and like had some form of influence over what Nicole did.
Oh, definitely. She's described as being overbearing.
Yeah. And both of them hate the idea of being like their parents.
Yeah.
And Nicole's mother was a movie no, not a movie star, a TV star.
Yeah.
She had a career in Hollywood, and maybe Nicole wanted to feel like she was truly working for what she was achieving. But as her star power diminished, she began to regret the choices she made.
Potentially. Their mother definitely would have been the reason they started acting in the first place, because there isn't much talk at all of Cassie and like what she did, but her mum does say she was always a nervous auditioner.
And there was a one-off line when Charlie got to LA about the show that Cassie was in currently.
I thought that was a stage show.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, she's in a stage show, yeah.
Yeah.
So she still does enjoy acting.
Yeah.
Maybe she's more of a theatre actor.
Yeah.
It's like how we had that discussion the other day of when you're doing theatre, it's a lot different. You don't see yourself.
Yeah.
The audience isn't as up close to you, and it's a different style of acting. It has to be bigger.
And we see it on TikTok as well as
TikTok acting.
Yeah, the TikTok acting versus movie acting versus theatre acting. And then there's also our experiences within our schooling, and also our lived experiences outside of school in theatre. So we've talked a lot about the sort of background of these characters and their mentalities, but we haven't really talked about the events of the movie yet.
There's one thing that I noticed, and I watched Marriage Story.
You watched it so many times.
I watched it. It was my hyperfixation for a while. I watched it every day, sometimes multiple times a day.
Yeah.
I listened to the soundtrack to help me fall asleep. I don't really know why I hyperfixated on Marriage Story and why I watched it so much. I know that I got to the point where I had to stop watching it so much because of the fighting scenes. I'm not good with fights, and parent characters fighting in the vicious way that they do, it's quite triggering to watch. Yet I subjected myself to that for so long. But it wasn't until watching it the other night that I realised Nicole, and I could just be looking too far into this, Nicole seems to flinch and get nervous around Charlie. And Charlie grew up with alcohol and violence in his childhood. And I'm wondering if, even in a subconscious way, that transferred into his marriage with Nicole.
Well, of course, we see it in the way that fight ended. But that could have also been attributed to just how intense things got.
Yeah.
But
we don't know what it was like. We don't truly know what it was like while they were married. We don't know if there was any kind of abuse or anything like that.
Of course, from the way that the characters describe it, there was...
She does mention gaslighting, though.
Yeah.
She does mention that he's a villain and he gaslit her.
Yeah, I would feel as though the primary form of abuse, if there was any, would have been emotional and mental abuse.
As opposed to anything physical.
Yeah, and who knows, maybe there might have been one or two instances, which is why she does flinch. Or she has just been so battered emotionally from this marriage that it even came out as a physical response.
Yeah, and another thing that sort of indicated that to me is Henry doesn't like them talking alone.
No.
There's a scene where Charlie mentions that he's going to talk alone to Nicole, and Henry doesn't like that.
No.
Henry also seems a bit nervous around his dad.
Unfortunately.
Charlie loves being a dad. is that because he loves having a kid, or is that because he wants to prove to everyone that he's better than his parents? Like, there's no doubt he surely loves the kid, but does it also come from a place of what he went through and being determined to be better, as if to be able to shove that in his parents' face, but he can't even do that because they don't have any contact?
Well, the thing is that when we enter the situation, we're already thinking of Nicole and Charlie as adults and parents. However, as we go through the story, we begin to peel back that perspective and then begin to see how trauma impacts the way people parent.
Because it definitely does.
Of course.
And with how young they were, because we don't know how old Charlie was.
No.
But he did mention being in his 20s when he got successful, so he would have, I'm assuming, been a similar, if not the same age as Nicole.
I actually interpret it as Charlie is actually younger.
I don't think Charlie's younger. I don't think Charlie's younger because Charlie had to move from a different state to New York, and he would have had to work his way up enough to be able to have his own theatre company. Even though it's struggling, he was the director. He would have had to build up his career a bit, and he wouldn't have done that before if he was younger. If he was like 19 or something, I don't think he would have been able to do that.
Okay.
Realistically, because from what I know of New York, it's like a theatre state. I mean, they have Broadway, don't they?
Yeah.
Broadway's in New York.
Yeah.
He wouldn't be able to just jump straight into being a director without having worked his way up first.
But also, the both of them wouldn't have necessarily gone into any form of therapy or counselling for their trauma, as even Nicole admits just before their fight scene that they're both incredibly stubborn, and even Henry's displaying those traits of being incredibly stubborn,
giving up when things get hard.
Yeah, which we can see examples of both Nicole and Charlie doing in their marriage. They're just giving up on things.
Yeah.
And sometimes giving up is the best thing to do.
One thing, the pacing in this movie is really good. I appreciate the pacing.
It's incredible because even though it's like a 2.5 hour long movie, I feel
it doesn't feel like it.
No, it doesn't feel like it. But also, you get through so much. Because I remember I was making my dinner in the first part of it, and my dinner takes 20 minutes to cook, and we had already achieved so much in that 20 minutes that it stunned me a little, because I forgot just how much they get through while also making it feel so quick.
They give you enough information so that you can feel satisfied enough to carry on, but they're not screwing around.
No.
They're not taking forever or explaining little things, but I was able to fully understand what was going on throughout the whole thing. I didn't get confused at any points, but I also didn't feel like the director was underestimating the intelligence of his audience.
Yeah. There's a difference between
show don't tell and not giving your audience enough information.
Yeah, but then there's also the opposite of that, where you do need to explain what's going on, but then there's just putting it out there. Just straight up putting it out there, not letting the audiences imagine.
In my opinion, there isn't like a ridiculous amount of exposition in this movie. That seems like it would be a tricky thing to balance, because they want us to have an understanding of the marriage and why these two characters have come to this point. But if you're just telling us through dialogue, because you can't really show us what the marriage was like unless it's through dialogue or flashbacks and stuff like that. It would be very easy for a movie like this to fall into just explaining everything that happened in the past, but it manages to stay mostly in the future. The opening scene is really good because we get an idea of these two characters. We know that Charlie came from nothing and he worked for what he's got. We know that Nicole is very maternal, like she always has food in the fridge, but she's also strong because she can open jars that Charlie can't open. And Charlie loves being a dad, even with the tantrums and the waking up at night and stuff.
Well, what was good to me about it was the fact that even though it was, I think, only maybe 2 minutes, it was effective in giving us an idea of who these characters are, but also then giving us the base work, but then almost completely constructing the building for me of building this connection to these characters so quickly, so efficiently, that the moment it cuts to the separation mediation, I could already feel that we hit of, oh, how did we get here?
Yeah.
How did we go from so much love and passion to this? But then what I loved was that opening sequence was so effortlessly but effectively explained away in the context of the film. But then it also wasn't pointless, because they come back to it at the end.
One thing that I say that nothing confused me in the movie, but something that did kind of confuse me, even though she says she doesn't like what she wrote, why didn't Nicole want to read out what she wrote?
I think it was a defensive tactic, in my opinion. It was in doing so, it would mean that she would have to admit that she does still have these feelings for Charlie, because this sort of anger and barricaded state of being for her at this time was what was actually driving her through to the divorce, which they did need. They needed that divorce. Who knows, if she had read out that letter then, who knows, maybe it could have just resulted in another one of these occurrences where they would have a rough patch, but then they'd give it another go.
But were they in the past, if they've now come to the point of divorce, were they really actually giving it another go? Or did they hit this rough patch, break up, get back together, but nothing changed? They didn't change their behaviours. Charlie didn't start listening to Nicole, but Nicole also didn't... I mean, she may have tried, but from what we see, she didn't try to establish herself as her own person.
She accepted the life of being Charlie's shadow and Charlie's drone, in a sense.
She was the mother. She was the muse. She lived for other people, but not for herself.
She accepted her role in Charlie's script, which was how she lived on the stage and at home.
Yep.
It was Charlie's script that she lived, and she was trying to convince herself that was the role to be.
She thought she wanted it to be enough for her, but it wasn't. It wasn't fulfilling. I wonder if also why she didn't read out her note is perhaps she didn't feel safe being that vulnerable with him.
Yeah.
Or perhaps it was just another example of how she's been silenced by Charlie so much throughout the relationship that she doesn't have her own voice. I mean, in the end, she doesn't even read out the letter.
No.
Henry finds it and Charlie reads it.
But I think the fact that she never got rid of it is also part of that protection.
Yeah.
That she's trying to create for herself, living under Charlie's rule.
And Charlie also, we get an idea that he probably has a few digs at Nicole quite early on, because he says, oh yeah, I'll read what I wrote. I like what I wrote. Nicole says I can't write, but I think it's pretty good. You didn't have to put her down to lift up what you wrote. So perhaps there were a few instances of, and there probably were, of him putting her down in attempts to lift himself up as well.
But I think that could have also come from the fact that he could not separate director and actor.
That's a good point.
Because the role of a director is the relationship between actor and director is the actor attempts to generate the director's
vision, bring it to life,
and the director then attempts to shape the actor to achieve the vision.
It's established that Charlie is very particular about what he wants. He, even on closing night, he's writing down notes, he's giving notes, and it makes sense for the other characters in the show because they're moving to Broadway. But he even writes notes for Nicole.
Yeah.
And Nicole encourages him to share them because she still cares about what he thinks.
And also, it's also part of showing that even though they are so disconnected and jagged towards each other, she still knows him.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, being together for a decade, they know each other. She still is thinking about him and saying, you're not going to be able to sleep until you tell me, so just tell me.
But then we see it again later on during the hashing out between the lawyers when it comes to lunchtime. Charlie can't decide, but Nicole knows him so well that she knows what he wants, but also what alterations need to be made to the meal.
Yeah. And he seems annoyed by that. Like, he's looking at it, he doesn't know what he wants. So Nicole takes over and is like, this is what he'll have and this is what I'll have. And he just kind of goes, okay. He seems annoyed that she has ordered for him, despite the fact that he had no idea what he wanted. And perhaps he doesn't know what he wants.
No.
Nah, at all.
No, because from... This is something I wanted to bring up, but I thought we'd go over the events of the movie first, but actually this is a better time to bring it up. Is in New Zealand we use the acronym COPMIA. What that acronym in New Zealand stands for is Children of Parents with Mental Illness and Addiction. That is a specific type of trauma that we see with these children and how they grow up. We also see it, some other people refer to it as parents that are emotionally immature, essentially parents that can't parent. That's part of why, as much as I hated Charlie, I could relate to him.
Did you hate Charlie?
In many ways I did. I felt sorry for him, I felt pity for him, but what frustrated me the most was the fact that I related myself so closely to him.
It's like your bad traits you see in him.
Of course. And
I mean, you did used to have quite the ego.
Yes.
So
yeah, as a fellow person with COPMIA trauma, I get the position he's in mentally, of he's just tried to build a life away from his childhood, but he's done so without any sort of direction.
He had such a lack of control in his life. That's probably why he gravitated towards directing, because then he has complete control.
Yes.
But then he seems to be the type that would potentially abuse that control and that power. Because when you think about it, there's quite a big power dynamic between a director and an actor.
Yes.
An actor can be replaced. The director can get rid of you. There's also so many instances of people in power taking advantage of people that are seen as, like, quote unquote below them.
Yeah.
There's a big power dynamic there. And to be in a relationship but also directing that person, it then transfers to their at-home life. Like, you can see that even when he leaves the theatre and leaves the after party, he's still in that mindset. He's still the director. Nicole also seeks his validation because she doesn't trust her own judgment anymore.
No.
She's agreed to doing this pilot, she's excited about it, and then she asks Charlie, you don't think it's bad, do you? Like, realistically, she doesn't need his approval or his opinion. He does abstract theatre. You know, I think we both relate to Charlie in the sense of we can be very harsh critics.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's a theatre thing.
Potentially. Because I was reading an article about how Marriage Story is not just a story about divorce, it's also a story about theatre.
It is.
And that was something that I think also drew us towards the movie at first. Once, of course, the first viewing.
Yeah.
Because at that time, we were still in the midst of theatre.
Also, we can't relate to the divorce storyline. We've never been divorced.
No.
We haven't experienced those emotions. We're not parents. We don't have a child. we're not in that kind of dynamic of we don't know what it's like to be married.
No.
But the part we could cling to and the part that we could relate to was theatre.
Yeah.
And that whole part of it. So we were able to see ourselves in the way the characters are presented through their acting and directing experiences. We still were able to relate to it, even though we couldn't relate to what's supposed to be the main theme of the story, which is divorce and love and separation and parenting. We were able to connect to a different part of it.
But what was also interesting to me about this movie was the fact that we were watching divorce proceedings happen in America.
Yes.
Because watching American systems from New Zealand is very strange.
It is. It is very strange.
Because as much as it's a joke for many of us to put a bit of judgment on the American systems, it's more to do with how alien they are to us and how they...
It's so different.
It's so different, and in many ways we almost perceive it as more difficult.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily complicated and...
But when it comes down to it, getting divorced in New Zealand is more difficult, because in America I think you can file for divorce just straight away.
Yeah,
but in New Zealand you have to wait.
You have to be separated for 2 years, I think.
Yeah. You have to be, like living your own lives for 2 years before you can get divorced, whereas in America you can just go straight into it, which I feel like that's easier in some regards, where that means if you get a divorce, the person has less power of you.
Yeah, but then also in America, they've got 50 different states, I believe it is.
The states, yeah.
And each state has slight variations on their laws.
Yeah, and it's so interesting how, she served him in LA, so he couldn't get a lawyer in New York. I get that those places are extremely far apart. I understand that. But the fact that the states they almost feel very disconnected.
But yet again, they are the United States of America.
Yeah.
But that is very strange, because they act like a country, a unified country, but they're also very...
They seem disconnected.
Yeah.
Different states have different laws. There's different ages of consent in different states. That seems a little confusing.
Yeah, different ages of consent. Maybe law enforcement have no jurisdiction in a different state.
Yeah.
And it's just bizarre. And of course, I'm making these statements, but of course I don't actually know all this for certain, because we've been in New Zealand our whole lives. We haven't had to experience their systems. And so we can't speak with absolute certainty, but this is just our understanding.
With American media, one of the biggest things that surprised me, it was a huge shock to me, was the court system.
Compared to our court system.
Yeah, and I feel like Marriage Story has potentially the most relatable court scene of when his lawyer stands up. When Charlie's lawyer stands up and starts getting aggressive, he's told to sit down. In any other depictions of court that I've seen in American media,
once the man stands up, he's given the floor.
The lawyer's up and standing, he's over standing by the jury, he's standing by the witness.
He's prancing around.
He's going everywhere.
He's a peacock.
Yeah. In New Zealand, they stand there, everyone stays still. I think occasionally they stand up and sit down.
Yeah.
From what I remember, they stand up and sit down, but it is so different. You don't have the lawyers coming over to you. You don't have the lawyers going over to the jury. They stay in their places. And I was so surprised.
Yeah.
Also, the inside of a courtroom, I walked in there and I was like, what is this? It looks like a regular kind of meeting room.
Yeah, we were just in a corporate meeting room.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also keep in mind that at that time...
It was a temporary space, though, wasn't it?
It was a temporary space, because at that time the Dunedin Court building was, I think, something happened to it.
Wasn't it under construction or something?
I think it might have been under renovation.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So the courts that we entered, you and I entered, even though for different reasons.
Yep.
They were essentially just an office building.
Yeah. It was very strange because, you know, you get shown around.
But then also...
Did you get shown around?
No.
Oh, okay, so I got shown around at first, so they told me, like, where I was going to be sitting and where everyone was going to be. And I remember walking in and being like, this is not what I expected.
No.
In the slightest.
Expect almost like a town hall.
One of those big rooms, and it's all...
In the court... sorry, not the court. The judge is up on this really high chair and
like
got the giant wooden desk.
Yeah, and then there's the, like, wooden bit where the jury were literally just sitting on regular chairs.
Yeah.
The judge was, like, raised up because that's probably, like, a requirement, but...
I think it's also just so the judge can be able to observe everything.
Yeah. I'm glad that they only showed us Nicole and Charlie going to court once.
Yes. Because
they go the once and it's a mess. I'm so glad that we don't have to sit through another court scene because it would have felt excessive.
Yeah.
In my opinion, like, they hammer out the details. His lawyer gets bored. He's being paid nearly $1,000 an hour.
Yeah.
And he gets bored of the case. I think that lawyer just enjoys the fighting part of it.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of Laura Dern's character. But he just...
Nora Finshaw.
Nora. That's it.
I think I can't...
That's it.
I can't remember the last time. I think it might have been Finshaw, but I may be wrong.
Yeah. Or is it Fanshaw? I think it's Fanshaw.
It's a vowel, sure.
Yeah. I initially didn't like her character.
No.
It wasn't until this last time watching it that I was actually able to appreciate her character.
Well, the thing is that, like, at first, she just comes off as this really catty woman who...
To me, she didn't come off as catty. She seemed too nice. Condescending in a way.
Two-faced?
Potentially.
I mean, I don't necessarily want to say bitchy.
Well, she doesn't even come off as inherently bitchy, though. One thing she does, and it's shown in the costuming, is she's represented in a seductive way with the dresses that she wears, and, like, she takes off her coat when they're in court, and, you know, you can...
But what I appreciated with her character was the fact that she, to me, was an embodiment of female empowerment. The way to, like, take the male-dominated system and turn it to her own game.
Yeah. She seemed like a bit of a flirt.
Yeah.
Like, the way she was praising Charlie for his work and stuff. She was definitely a bit of a flirt. And I think the unfortunate thing about that is we're kind of conditioned to think less of women that are flirty or have a flirty vibe to them.
It was her way of flying under the radar for a sneak attack. But what I appreciated was, because there were things I didn't notice until this time around, such as when Nora was preparing Nicole for the
questioning?
The questioning of the inspector.
Yep.
Yeah. Nora then went into talking about how women are held to a different standard than men.
We can accept a flawed father, and then fathers that are, you know, good fathers, they're seen as, oh wow, look at this, when really
it's what should be the base expectation.
If a mother acts like that, she's just doing her job. That's what mothers are supposed to do.
Yeah.
We don't expect fathers to be good, and we praise them when they do the bare minimum.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the realest, most impactful comments.
Pratt.
Let's not get controversial in our first episode, shall we? Let's not burn bridges.
I don't want to bridge with any Pratt lover.
Oh my god. Are you forgetting that one of us wants to work in the industry and he is a very big name in the industry?
Oh, yeah. But throughout all the terrible things that happen between these two characters and the both mental and physical toll on both of them throughout this whole process, what I appreciated was how in the end they both decided to put the child first. Whenever with the whole...
I feel like their goal was to put Henry first, but Charlie was trying to say, yeah, he wants Henry to be happy, but did he? Or, because
at the end he did, is what I'm trying to get at.
at the end I think he kind of had to accept it.
Right.
Because he is so determined, like, we are a New York family. Are you, though? Because Henry, his family is in LA. His grandmother, his auntie, his cousins. He's got 3 cousins. He's got an uncle. His family is in LA. Why would you try to force this kid to be in New York? Because it's not for him.
No.
It's for Charlie, because that's where Charlie's work is, because Charlie does theatre.
It's the life Charlie built for himself.
Yeah.
Even when opportunities came around for Charlie to move that life.
Like, they talked about, oh yeah, we'll talk about doing some time in LA, and then he turned down a position, but he accepted a position somewhere else where he moved the whole family. I think it was for a year?
It was 6 months to Copenhagen.
Yeah.
And it would have been a year in
In
LA.
LA.
Yeah, which he said he didn't want to abandon his theatre company.
Yep.
But then did it for Copenhagen.
Yep. There's, of course, the show going to Broadway storyline.
Yes.
And the grant money.
And how that all got funneled into the divorce.
Yeah, he spent all that on the divorce. The first lawyer, the old guy that he talks to.
Oh, Bert.
Bert, I love him.
Yeah, Bert's great.
He's soft-spoken. We need to talk about Bert. Did Bert have one of his partners die? Because you said he's been in that... Because you pointed out that he's been in that position 4 times, but he's only had 3 divorces, so one of them must have died. But I interpreted that as he's been through 3 divorces and married 4 times, and he talks about hoping this last one will stick.
Well, that's... See, now you've created a third interpretation from what I was trying to articulate, which I didn't do very well to you.
Oh. What were you trying to say?
Is that he had someone close to him die, not necessarily a partner, because he...
A death without a body.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I took that in a very literal sense.
I thought you were talking about that one of his partners died.
No.
That's the way you initially expressed it. And I was like, how do you get that?
No, it was that he had a death.
I mean, given his age, yeah, he will have experienced death in his life.
Yeah.
But he's also... Charlie really should have just stuck with Bert, because he ended up spending so much money of the MacArthur grant on getting that other lawyer.
On Jay.
And nothing changed.
No.
Nothing changed.
Jay made the situation worse.
He did. Because then if he hadn't gone to Jay, Nicole wouldn't have felt the need to show up at Charlie's apartment, and they wouldn't have had that huge fight.
No.
Because they'd hammered out 90% of the details with Bert, and, you know, it should have been resolved then, but it wasn't. Because Charlie doesn't like to lose.
No.
I mean, he blames Nicole for losing his spot on Broadway. But if the show had already been going for a while, I understand that he's got a new lead actress. But why aren't the actors self-sufficient enough to be rehearsing? And also, he must have great frequent flyers points.
Yeah.
From flying back and forth constantly.
Well, the thing is that I think his assistant director is no longer there because of her abilities, but because of the relationship he was forming with her.
Oh, she's the assistant director?
Yeah.
You know, because I'm pretty sure she has a tape measure around her neck.
No, you're thinking of the costuming one.
The one who he had the affair with?
Yeah.
Wait, so who's the assistant director?
She was the one that had all the books and the big scroll that she tried handing to him at the rehearsal.
Yeah, that's who he had the affair with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the costumer was a different person.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about the costumer. I'm talking about the woman who he had the affair with.
Yeah.
At one point, she has a tape measure around her neck.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that.
She has a tape, at least it looks like it to me. She had a tape measure around her neck, and I saw that, and I was like, oh yeah, she must be a costumer as well. Even though there's established another costumer, I was like, oh yeah, she must be. She must be a costumer because she has a tape measure around her neck.
No, but yeah, but that was the assistant director.
I see.
Yeah.
Wow, he's even more of an asshole for sleeping with the assistant director. Like, I thought she was a costumer.
No. And that's what got Nicole so upset. And then when she
I thought she was upset because, you know, they worked together, so yeah, it's
Yeah.
shitty regardless, but I thought she was a costumer.
No. She was the assistant director, which meant they would have had alone time together.
She's not a very good assistant director then,
Why?
if they got kicked off Broadway.
Precisely, which is what I'm getting at, is that it seems to me like she was no longer there for her abilities as the assistant director. She was there because,
Eye candy.
yeah, for Charlie. It was purely for Charlie's benefit.
Ugh.
And
But surely she must have had... You know what? Imagine if she sabotaged the show out of spite because she asked to come over and Charlie said no.
yeah,
Imagine if she sabotaged it out of spite.
well, potentially. And maybe by dunking the show, it would get Charlie to come back to save it.
Yep. Or seeing that the show was struggling, he'd come back and he'd stick around and...
Yeah.
Ugh.
Because we saw that even though they had what Charlie claims to be a one-off time, the emotional relationship still continued. And
Yeah, he mentioned you should be upset that I had a laugh with her.
yeah.
I don't know, she comes off as a bitch. I did not like her, and I imagine we're not, she's supposed to be portrayed as a character that we don't like.
Yeah.
But God, she annoys me. Marianne.
Yep.
Marianne was her name, because her friend tells her not to go over to Charlie, and then she's bending over and whispering in his ear. She's in the train on the way home. Do they call that the subway?
Yeah.
Okay. The subway. When they're on the subway, just makes me think of a giant sandwich, but okay. When they're on the subway on the way home, they're on opposite sides. Nicole is sitting down, and we see very clearly on the door it says no leaning. And on the other side, Charlie is leaning on the door. But also, Charlie's standing up. So he's a big man.
He is a big man.
He's towering over Nicole. And is that just another representation of the power dynamic?
Potentially.
The director is very particular. I remember in an interview Scarlett saying that they couldn't even add in a but. He's very specific about sticking to the script. I also watched, it was a press conference thing. I wonder if talking about Charlie being so particular in what he does is a self-insert for the director. I don't think I've seen any of his other work, but just based on the interviews that I have seen, it doesn't seem like he gives his actors very much freedom.
Yeah.
He's this is what I want, this is how you're going to do it, but he also mentions he expects them to push back, and but can actors really push back against the director? Because they're supposed to listen. Actors are supposed to bring the vision of the director to life, and I feel I understand that the movie turned out amazing. He did what he did because he wanted it to be a certain way, but I feel you also need to give your actors freedom.
Yep.
You need to let them become these characters and represent them in a way, because if they're being forced of no, you need to do it like this, and if that's constant, I feel there's going to be a disconnect between actor and character.
Well, that's what I really appreciated with some of my directors a few years ago, is that they allowed the actors to explore.
Yeah.
Although the directors had a vision, they wanted to see what sort of middle ground could be met. What
They almost set boundaries of their expectations and hopes, but they weren't so controlling. Because I feel if you weren't dedicated to a project with a director like that, and didn't have an emotional connection to it, you could very easily lose interest and not give your best performance.
Yeah.
Actors need freedom. And I'm not saying that they go off and write their own lines and they do whatever they want to do.
No.
But you need to give them a chance to explore with it. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with an average performance.
Yeah.
And Scarlett and Adam do not give average performances by any means.
Oh, goodness, no.
They give amazing performances. I remember being gutted that Scarlett didn't win any awards.
That's right.
I was so upset. I was genuinely so upset. I was like, she's got this, like, surely, and she didn't.
Yeah.
In saying that, Laura Dern did win a lot of awards. It wasn't just was it a Golden Globe that she got? I always get the Golden Globes and the Oscars mixed up. For the longest time, I thought they were the same thing.
Yeah.
It turns out they're not. I think it was last year that I learned that.
Oh no, we only figured it out last year because we were like, oh, we should probably pay attention.
Yep.
Or it might have been the year before. It might have been the 20...
It was the 2020...
Because that had the 2019
films, yeah.
Yeah, so it was only last year we actually figured out the...
That they're different things.
Yeah.
I have made a fool of myself in front of so many people.
Well...
It's fine, though. But
that also, I think, shows that we were raised more within...
We're theatre kids.
We were raised within theatre instead of film.
We're theatre kids. We're not film kids. We don't... The industry is very alien to me. And it's kind of strange because it's the industry that I want to work in, but theatre is the one that I know better.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is just because of opportunities based on where you live.
Yeah.
There's nothing here.
There's very little film.
It reminds me of Kim biking through an active set on her way to work because some Netflix show was shooting in Dunedin and it was in her way. It was my partner's mum, it was in her way. She just biked through a set. And part of me found that hilarious and so very Kiwi. But on the other side, I was like, I can only imagine how stressed people were of like, get this woman off our set before she hurts herself.
Yeah.
And she did it again. She did it more than once.
Well, the subsequent times she was wanting to see if it could happen again.
Yeah, she was like, well, let's see how this goes. I think the first time she did it, she didn't realise it was a set though. But after that, she realised, and she's like, oh, okay. I'll give these people a run for their money. What was he even shooting here? I know it was some Netflix show.
I believe it was a romance. I can't.
A romance in Dunedin.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I could be wrong, but I think that's what it was.
Would not surprise me. Oh yeah, I was talking about Laura Dern. And this is definitely something that I've been like working on, but I can struggle to disconnect actor from character. So because I didn't like Laura Dern's character, I started to get annoyed by Laura Dern, which was so stupid because she plays one of, if not my favourite characters in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And then I got over that, which I'm glad. And then I remember seeing a thing of she wasn't getting hired because she played the girlfriend of Ellen on some show when Ellen came out.
Yeah.
And so homophobia, she wasn't getting hired anymore, and I saw that and I was like, okay, like and then I managed to separate actor from character because that is an important thing to do. The actors are not the characters. I just had such an emotional connection to this movie and such an attachment that I started getting over it, but I got over that. Thank God, because Laura Dern seems absolutely lovely.
So this movie, although it can be a little confronting to watch, it is powerful and well done.
It is. It's very well done.
Yeah.
It's well paced. It's well made. I love the grainy look of it. The image is a bit grainy.
Well, I found...
I like that.
I found that was only really present in the beginning, during that first sequence, and then it got crisper as we entered the present more and more.
Or perhaps you just got used to seeing it.
That is potentially what happened.
Because that was a stylistic choice.
Okay.
That was a stylistic choice by the director. That's how he likes shooting. And I really like the grainy sort of feel to it. Because it doesn't make the picture like worse. It's still enjoyable to watch. It's not like terrible quality or anything, but it just has that grainy feel. And it almost feels comforting and familiar. And I think that's because we've gotten so used to like 4K and all that stuff of these extremely clear pictures
Whereas the grainy picture is reminiscent of our earlier times.
I suppose it reminds me of what I grew up with, really, because I grew up with older movies. I didn't really grow up with like new releases and stuff, so I, growing up, had no concept of current pop culture because I was there obsessed with actresses like Doris Day. I was devastated when she died. She was an amazing person.
And Marriage Story, I think, will forever be a landmark in Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver's filmographies.
Yep.
And their careers.
Yep.
As it was just a testament to...
It really shows how versatile they are as actors, because it would be... I mean, Scarlett playing Black Widow, it's very easy for any Marvel actors to then be seen as, oh, you're a Marvel actor. And I think it's the same with Star Wars, where people look at Adam Driver and they don't see Adam Driver, they see him playing Kylo Ren.
Yeah.
And like I said at the beginning, I'm really glad that I hadn't watched those movies before seeing Marriage Story. And I don't know if I will ever get around to watching those movies, to be honest. Some people say they're terrible, some people say they're great. I'm just not interested enough to watch them. And I think it might be better if I don't, because that way I can enjoy Adam Driver's emotional work a lot more.
Yeah.
And I hope he does more of it. It's very easy for actors to end up falling into getting typecast and stuff like that. And Scarlett, she did a lot before going to Marvel, and she's done a lot, not necessarily since, because she's only recently sort of stopped her time there, but she continues to be in a lot.
She continues to be versatile.
Yeah.
I mean...
She's proved herself as an actress.
Yeah, she's done all sorts of things.
Does she have any Oscars or Golden Globes?
I
don't think she does.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I don't think she does, which is kind of surprising because she is really talented.
Well, I suppose it'd be like people being...
It's like Leonardo DiCaprio.
That's where I was going. It was only until he crawled into a bear carcass that he finally got a...
Yep, he had to crawl into a bear carcass and break his vegetarianism. He ate some kind of raw meat or something.
Nasty.
Is there anything else we want to say about this movie?
I feel as though I've covered most of what I...
The kid who plays Henry, he did a good job.
Yeah, we have neglected...
We have neglected to talk about Henry, even though a lot of it is focused on...
Yeah.
It's, their experience co-parenting. It's very hit or miss with kid actors.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I think it was last year or something, it had been years since I'd watched a specific movie franchise that was adapted from books of an author that I will not name, but I went back and watched the first movie and realised just how bad the acting is from the kids, because it was like their first roles, and if a kid is given a main character, it can be difficult. There are some kid actors that are amazing. There's McKenna Grace. I think she's a teenager now.
Yeah.
That is wild.
I know.
Because I still see her as that little kid that acted alongside Chris Evans. Like, to me, she's still a little kid. And Jacob Tremblay, who was in Room, which is one of my favourite movies, and he was just a kid there. He's a teenager now, too.
Yeah.
But yeah, the kid who played Henry, he did a good job. He felt like a kid.
It felt authentic from him, which was good, because if the child was somewhat disjointed or didn't feel necessarily natural,
yeah,
that could have ruined everything.
Yep.
And that's why the kid, even though we have neglected to talk about him, did such an incredible job.
Yeah, he did. He had a good performance.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's been in anything else, or if he's going to be anything else soon, but he's a cute kid. Yeah, he's a cute kid.
Yeah. Oh, but he delivered some of those lines brilliantly.
He did. He felt very natural.
Yeah.
It felt very natural. It didn't feel like a kid that was trying to overact.
Yeah.
I don't know who the kid's acting coach is, but they did good. Oh, something I want to say. I just remembered it. 2 scenes that I did not understand at all and continue to not understand.
Is it the singing?
It's the singing.
I
don't understand why that was included. I imagine the director had a reason.
I think it was to do with where the songs originated from. I saw the headline of an article, but I didn't read it.
Okay.
But then I did want to look into Electra before we recorded this, but I didn't get around to it.
Yeah, I just don't understand I like with Nicole and her mum and her sister singing, like they're performing at a party that, you know, they're an acting family, that makes sense in that context. But then
Charlie singing at the social club.
yeah, nothing against Adam's performance, but
He did well considering he's not really a singer.
yeah, I left the room during that part because it makes me so unsettled.
It's more just confusing.
It doesn't, yeah.
Unless you understand the significance behind those scenes,
Yeah,
they're just not really gonna land terribly well.
they didn't land for me. I didn't understand them. I'm sure that like the director, he was so specific about everything and he wrote it as well. He will have had a reason. But is there something to be said of, if people need to research the songs you're putting into your film to understand why that piece is in there, is that a good choice? Is that a good choice? Shouldn't people be able to just watch the movie and understand? I feel like, especially, I don't know how big he is of a director, but
This was the first I'd ever seen his name.
yeah, but smaller directors and stuff, they feel the need for everything to have a meaning or a double meaning, and everything is so specific. I think part of that is because of the way English teachers teach, of the curtains were red so he was lustful, that kind of thing. And it's great being able to have theories about movies, but if a scene feels so disjointed and out of place that you feel the need to look it up and to understand it, does it really have a place in the movie? I can understand there's probably like some themes that carry between Electra and the movie, but the songs just feel so disjointed. I don't get it.
The thing about Electra is that it can make sense. The thing about Electra is that it can make sense if you understood the themes, and Electra isn't something that's really spoken about outside of maybe hardcore theatre, English or classics education. Unfortunately, if there was more to the Electra stuff, we didn't really have the opportunity to grasp that. But then I think maybe these songs and the significance of Electra is rewarding a certain type of people that maybe the
people that are so dedicated to understanding every piece and tearing apart every piece.
That, but also maybe they're personal for the director, and he's trying to reach out to people who have similar interests or habits or experiences. Thankfully, they didn't come at the cost of the quality of the film overall.
The integrity of it.
Yeah.
It's just like for most people it wouldn't. Most people, they wouldn't fixate on that kind of thing.
No.
But for me, I do. I hope I don't come off as insulting the director in any way. It's kind of a fine line. It feels like a fine line to me of, like, I'm interested in being a director. So I feel like I can't say anything bad on other directors and I can't critique them. Or if I critique other directors, I'm opening myself up for harsh criticisms on my own work.
I think we're trying to walk that fine line that Charlie couldn't walk, which was the difference between critiquing and condescending.
Yeah.
Where I feel personally, which I would like to believe is truthful, that we are trying to create conversation.
Yeah.
We're trying to have a discussion. We're not trying to say these as fact.
And when it comes down to it, they're our opinions.
Yeah.
We're not going to like every movie we see. We're not going to like every actor we see. We're not going to like the morals that some actors have. And I just feel like I'm in a bit of a tough position of, I want to fully critique these movies and give my thoughts, but at the same time, even though it's unrealistic for me to hope and expect to be a director in the industry, I feel like I don't want to risk burning any potential bridges. But would I be compromising my own morals if I worked with people whose morals don't align with mine, or that I don't agree with them, just to be able to have a chance?
Well, then also I feel as though by being able to critique these other members of the industry, you are potentially then constructing bridges from people who do genuinely want the criticism. They want to hear what other people think, because they know that they are not the be all and end all of cinematography. And those are the type of people that we'd like to enter the industry with.
Yeah. When it comes down to it, I adore Marriage Story. It's one of my favourite movies. The actors give amazing performances. Gotta hand it to the director, like, he knows what he wants, even if I don't specifically agree with not giving your actors very much freedom. And when it comes down to it, I wasn't on that set. He may have given them more freedom than it comes off as.
There are many different types of directors. You two may just be different.
There are so many different styles. I don't have to agree with everything a writer or a director does to be able to enjoy what they have produced. I could honestly talk about Marriage Story for a long time, but we should probably leave it here. We've talked about it a lot. This is already going to be a mission to edit, and I've got 2 days to do it if I want to get this up on the anniversary. So, oopsies.
Well, thank you all for listening to our rambling and opinions.
And if you want to hear more from us, then stick around.
I'm just rambling now.
I do not know how to end this, to be honest.
Alrighty, well,
goodbye, I guess.
toodles.
Fucking toodles, really?
That's what I say these days.